Leader.
Madam Deputy Speaker, may I seek your consent and the general assent of members present to move that the proceedings on the item under discussion be exempted from the provisions of Standing Order number 48.8 to remove the time limit in respect of the Minister of Home Affairs' speech.
I give my consent. Does the Leader of the House have the general assent of honourable members present to so move? Aye. Leader, please proceed.
Madam Deputy Speaker, I beg to move that the proceedings on the item under discussion be exempted from the provisions of Standing Order number 48.8 in respect of the Minister of Home Affairs' speech.
The question is, as moved by the Leader of the House, as many as of the opinion say aye. Aye. To the contrary, say no. I think the ayes have it. The ayes have it. Minister Shanmugam.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Last year, the SPF marked its 200th anniversary, a significant milestone. We had Sir Stamford Raffles landing in 1819, and the police force was set up in 1820. Essentially set up from the very first beginnings of modern Singapore. And I thank Mr. D'Souza for moving this motion for this House to recognize the essential contributions of SPF over 200 years and for creating this occasion. Mr. D'Souza outlined the SPF's journey over the years and its contributions to Singapore's development. The SPF started as a 12-man team in 1820. It is now, today, a 45,000 strong force with regular police officers, full-time national servicemen, and supported by civilian officers, war NS men, and volunteers. The SPF now is a respected force with a high standard of operational excellence. Its success has to be tested by looking at the lived experiences of Singaporeans. And what are the lived experiences? I have, over the years, shared with members, probably every year, what Singaporeans feel about their surroundings, safety, security. Mr. Melvin Yong referred to the latest Gallup report, 2020, which shows that 97% of residents in Singapore feel safe when they are walking alone in their neighborhoods at night. The global average is 69%. I'll come back to this point later, but I think on no account will Singaporeans want to give that up. That is a fundamental human right, to be able to walk where you wish and where you feel, man or woman, at any time of the day or night, without fear, and to allow your child to take public transport without fear. Singaporeans' confidence in the SPF is also extremely high. Mr. Yong also made this point. This has been so for many years. The latest 2020 IPS study shows that 87% of respondents were confident or very confident in the SPF. And it's the highest level of confidence amongst all state institutions surveyed in Singapore, and also the highest globally across other police forces in the study. What we have, this level of safety and security and confidence in the force, did not just happen the natural course of events. It is a result of paths taken and also paths avoided, not taken. I will, in the speech, highlight some of the factors that have made SPF successful and have helped it keep law and order in Singapore. We will then pay tribute to the contributions of SPF officers, and third, outline some of SPF's plans for the future. Let me start with some of the factors that have led to SPF's success and its remarkable progress over the years since independence. There are many factors which can help or impede the performance of a police force. For example, the levels of governance in society, the levels of equity and inequality, many factors like that. For the purposes of this motion, I won't speak about these larger factors. Instead, I'll take a slightly narrower focus and deal with the factors that are more closely connected with police work and police as an institution. The three factors I'll touch on are our criminal justice system, second, the quality of leadership in the SPF, and third, maintaining trust with the community. Let me deal with each. First, our criminal justice system. No police force operates in a vacuum. Its operations are fundamentally influenced by the criminal justice system, within the framework of which the force operates. If the criminal justice system does not work, if there is no proper due process and crimes go unpunished, then it's difficult for a police force to be effective. Madam Deputy Speaker, with your permission, may I display some slides on the screen as I make my points?
Please proceed.
In this context, I have often referred to a speech by Mr. Lee Kuan Yew, who said this in 1962. And I put it up for members to look at it. In a settled and established society, law appears to be the precursor of order. Good laws lead to good order. That is the form that you will learn. But the hard realities of keeping the peace between man and between authority and the individual can be more accurately described if the phrase were inverted to order and law. For without order, the operation of law is impossible. Members will notice he said order and law, not law and order. He reversed or inverted the phrase. You have to establish order first, then laws can work. Otherwise, laws won't work. I think it's fair to say Mr. Lee sometimes took a very a view similar to that which Hobbes had put out about man in society. That philosophy underpins the changes we made to the criminal justice system, which we had inherited from the British. A lot of it, I would say, is primarily due to what Mr. Lee himself believed, thought through, and brought about, with a deep understanding of how people actually behave, how societies work, and how laws actually work. The criminal justice system we inherited has a long history, evolving over many centuries in England. We adapted, changed, and in some respects, we changed quite fundamentally. And that helped create a framework for the police to be effective. Let me give 3 examples as to what I mean. We changed our laws, for example, to allow the courts to draw an adverse inference if an accused person puts up a defense that he did not mention when he was first interviewed by the police. This position was based on the UK Criminal Law Revision Committee recommendation, which had then not been put into practice in the United Kingdom. The committee had said that hardened criminals could greatly hamper investigations by refusing to answer any questions. So put the onus on them to answer the questions. It runs against a basic principle, some might say, the golden thread, as it were, of the right to remain silent. But we made the major change in 1976. It encouraged suspects to be forthcoming during investigations. Accused persons have to tell the police the truth when interviewed, or adverse inferences can be drawn. Members would have seen, perhaps in TV dramas, police will tell the suspect that he or she has a right to remain silent, and if the police officers did not do so, that becomes or could become a procedural problem, and the suspect may walk free on a technicality. Our position, it is in the public interest that persons under investigations by the police tell the truth when interviewed. The change has had a big impact on how suspects behave and the entire criminal process. In this context, maybe I can take the opportunity of dealing with or responding to some points that Ms. Lim made. I think she made the following points about VRI, translation in other languages, and resource allocation, as well as helping victims and victim impact statements. Steps have been taken, further steps will be taken. I have responded on these previously. Since today's motion is on the SPF and 200 years and celebrating SPF, I will not go into detail into those points, but we can discuss those on another occasions. There is another point that coincidentally forms a big part of my speech too, which Ms. Lim made reference to Professor Herbert Packer's work on due process and crime control. While it's not so clear, I think Ms. Lim would probably move a little bit more on the due process model, or move more on fall on the side of the due process model. The approach we have taken is not ideological. It is to see what is suitable, what works in Singapore. And as I said, in 1976, the steps we took would probably be described as more akin to the crime control model. And as Ms. Lim was speaking, I remembered a speech by our former Chief Justice, Mr. Chan Sek-Kyong. So I apologize, I have to read it on my phone because I hadn't known that the point was going to be made. This was a lecture that the 2008, I think Justice Chan was Chief Justice at that point, he made in the centenary of Mr. David Marshall's birth, and this is what he had to say. And I can do no better than what perhaps the greatest jurist Singapore has seen said about this process. He says from paragraph 13 onwards, "Before I discuss some of these amendments, let me now sketch out for you the features of the criminal justice process that was in place in Singapore before 1976. We then had an investigative and trial process regulated by the Criminal Procedure Code and the Evidence Act, which basically provided the framework for a common law trial process, which was highly admired, if not revered, in England at that time." I make a point to take members through this in some detail because if you want a safe and secure Singapore with due process for all of us, it's important to get this fundamental principle right, because there is and there will always be a tendency to move towards a much more of putting hurdles and processes in the way of the police. The point is to strike the right balance. And I would emphasize that all members and all ministers for Home Affairs and Law remember these fundamental principles. That's why I said in my speech, paths taken and paths avoided. If we hadn't taken this path in 1976, neither the police nor Singapore would have today's crime control system. So let me read a little bit more about what Chief Justice Chan, as he then was, said. The fundamental principle was a presumption of innocence. This meant that A, the prosecution must prove every ingredient of the offense against the accused beyond a reasonable doubt. B, the accused had the right to remain silent at any stage of the criminal process, from investigation to trial. And C, the accused had the right not to incriminate himself except in restricted circumstances. And D, the accused's statements to the police were not admissible except in restricted circumstances. E, he had the right to give an unsworn statement from the dock. All evidence, even if true, was not admissible if it might have a prejudicial effect on the jury. G, the practice of the courts was to require strict compliance with the rules of evidence and procedure, to have strict oversight of jury directions on accomplice evidence and corroboration. In a paper published in 1964 on the criminal justice process in the US, Professor Herbert Packer of Stanford University described the two models of criminal justice process, namely due process and crime control. This paper has since been regarded as one of the most important contributions in systematic thought about criminal justice. The basic features are those I have just described of a criminal justice process before 1976. That means very much due process. Because of the presumption of innocence, priority must be given to the prosecution of the accused, protection of accusers' rights in a fair manner. Police powers of arrest and investigation should be limited to prevent potential official oppression of the individual. Procedural rights are not mere technicalities. Law enforcement officers and the prosecution should be held accountable to rules, procedures, and guidelines to ensure fairness and consistency. And he goes on, I will skip a little bit. And he says at para 15, Marshall achieved great success under the system. Many other lesser lights also shone. But it was inevitable that the prosecution would sooner or later take note of the defects from its point of view of the existing process, which had been so ably and amply demonstrated by Marshall. It must have led the government to rethink seriously about the objectives of the criminal justice process and how to achieve those objectives. Let me now introduce the other model of criminal justice process that Professor Packer had identified in his paper, with the crime control model. And he sets out the features. Repression of crime should be the most important function of criminal justice because order is a necessary condition for a free society. Criminal justice should concentrate on vindicating victims' rights rather than protecting defendants' rights. Police power should be expanded to make it easier to investigate, arrest, search, seize, and convict. Legal technicalities that handcuff the police should be eliminated. If the police make an arrest and a prosecutor files a criminal charge, the accused should be presumed guilty because the fact-finding of police and prosecutors is highly reliable. I'm setting these out. I'm not saying that I agree with them. This is what Professor Packer had identified. The main objective of the criminal justice process should be to discover the truth or to establish the factual guilt of the accused. And he has a few other factors too. In the 1976 amendments introduced many features of the crime control model. Ironically, these amendments were based on the recommendations of the 1972 11th report of the UK Criminal Law Revision Committee, which the UK government had rejected. For members' reference, those who are not lawyers, the UK Criminal Law Revision Committee comprised eminent jurists, lawyers. They looked at the system in the UK and they came out with a set of recommendations. But it was not doable in the United Kingdom. In Singapore, it was passed into law, many of the recommendations. And Chief Justice Chan, as he was, sets out the two major changes: that all statements made by an accused to a police officer in the course of investigation would be admissible in evidence. And second, the trial process. If the accused is called upon to enter his defense, he has no right to make an unsworn statement from the dock. These two broad changes led to an increase in the conviction of the factually guilty through pleas of guilt or at trials. Crime control was strengthened with the use of rebuttable and irrebuttable presumptions in substantive offenses. These developments, together with better and more dedicated and efficient law enforcement, have reduced the crime rate over the years and have made Singapore a safer place to live in. You might think that this statement is somewhat simplistic, but many people would agree that law enforcement in Singapore, although not perfect, is among the best in the world. So that's the Chief Justice's view, as he was in 2008. Now, that is not to say that, therefore, crime control becomes the be-all and end-all. Of course, you must have fairness in the system. So it's a question of finding the right balance. But I would ask members to carefully consider what is suitable for our society when seeking to strike the right balance. The right balance is not or should not be guided by pure ideology. It should be guided by what works, what is fair, what is right. And we have a system today, trained judges, a defense bar, rules of process, procedure, presumption of innocence, except in the context of, say, drug trials, where presumption of innocence is there, but the defendant, the accused, has got to go and prove specific factors because those are within his knowledge. And in corruption trials, also reversal of onus of proof. So we think, we do not say we have arrived. That will be not only inaccurate, it will be hubris, but we are constantly refining it, constantly trying to find the right balance. And the right balance also changes when society changes. But our philosophy is that the police investigation should not be made into a series of technical hurdles which have to be cleared, but it must be a clear and fair process that helps to arrive at the truth. And I think all members will agree that it's a question of balance, and it's really a question of how you strike that balance. And we have, for example, talked about, implemented in some cases, initiatives like BRI, the appropriate adult scheme, other initiatives, and all of this will help in the fairness in the process. Another example that I would put forward in going back to my point about the law enforcement framework within which the police operate is that tough penalties that have been introduced to deal with serious crimes. I spoke about drugs, corruption, many other offenses. The penalties were changed, and where necessary, onus of proof was reversed. If you have wealth, you're a public servant, you have wealth which is not explained, the onus is on you to prove. We also have preventive detention, CLTPA, adapted from British laws. Jury trials were abolished. Instead, we have trials presided over by professional judges who are better able to handle the complex issues for a more reliable fact-finding process. It lessens the theatrics, reduces the risk of injustice, and the institutions required for an effective judicial justice system. The judiciary, the public prosecution service, the bar associations, they have all been built up. As a result, we have a criminal justice system which has worked well for us, but it is constant work, constant refining, constant tending, and it will continue to have to be so. If the system does not work well and criminals walk away because the system is corrupt or weak, then police morale and discipline will go down. Police will not be effective. We have avoided that. Now, I've only given a few examples of this framework, but members can assume that there have been many changes, they've been very substantive, that has led to the system we have today. But let me now move on this context of the SPF 200. The second key factor behind SPF's success, and that's the quality of officers in the SPF and the quality of its leadership. The focus by Mr. Lee and his team was on building not just the size of the police force upon independence, but also the quality of officers and leadership in the SPF. High quality does not only mean educational qualifications. You need qualities of character, a sense of purpose, and you must be able to handle the pressure and perform on the job. In 1972, 7 years after independence, and again I quote Mr. Lee, addressing police officers at the police dining in, and I quote, "There are certain virtues in the force which never changes. It must have high morals. It must be proud of itself. And it can't be proud of itself if it hasn't got the right leadership. It must have that sense of purpose that comes out of men trained on a common doctrine. And it must have a sense of continuity." Almost 40 years later, in 2011, at his final police dining in, Mr. Lee said, and I quote, "We cannot have a situation where the criminals are smarter and better resourced than you. If we don't recruit strong officers with the moral fiber and a sense of purpose, you will go downhill very fast." In the 40 years in between and before, these lessons were taken to heart and applied. Today, there is rigor in who gets to become a police officer. Less than 1 out of every 10 applicants to the SPF is accepted as direct sergeants or inspectors. The emphasis is on quality. SPF also tries to ensure that good officers move up, regardless of their entry rank. It implemented the unified rank structure in 2016, went beyond academic qualifications. It provides faster progression through the ranks for officers who perform well. Once you are in service, how you perform should matter more than your qualifications when you first came in. SPF also has a scholarship scheme, prestigious, competitive, highly sought after. Some who spoke earlier on this motion, MPs Murali, Melvin, Patrick, all scholars, and of course DPM, SPF sent him on his first trip overseas to Cambridge. As a side note, if I may say so, one of the problems that SPF is finding that other services are increasingly looking at SPF, because apart from DPM, the HCS and various other offices, PermSecs and those in other ministries have come. I suppose the approach we have to take is that we spot, we groom, we invest, we train, and then we should be glad that they are taken by others. The SPF is also becoming more gender diverse. Today we have 1,800 women in the SPF, making up 20%, 1/5 of the force. They serve in every division, including specialist divisions. Madam Speaker, I've asked for a slide to be put up. Senior Staff Sergeant Siti Aisha. She is from the Emergency Response Team, which is, as members will know, our dedicated fast response police unit. And in the event of a terrorist incident, she and her colleagues will be on the ground immediately. The other photo is that of Sergeant Anna Anthony from the Community Policing Unit. Going back to Siti Aisha, she is 30 years old. Her childhood dream was to be a police officer. She volunteered for the ERT conversion course, which is tough, and she's the first ERT officer in Woodlands Division. ERT officers like her are trained in tactical and counter-assault skills. She patrols in public places with her gear, which is up to 17 kilograms, and she maintains her IPPT Gold and marksman qualifications. She is also a physical training instructor, a police defense tactics instructor, and a range safety officer, and highly regarded amongst her peers. Gender is no barrier in the police force, even for the physically and mentally demanding roles like the ERT. And SPF actively grooms its officers for leadership positions in the SPF. They will undergo postings in ground units, patrols and operations, investigations, intel. They may spend some time in MHA getting policy experience and the wider public service, sharpen their policy understanding, make them think whole of government. Some of them, the younger officers, may spend some time with me, assisting me directly. And if they perform well, prove that they can do the job, they will be appointed to command positions in SPF. SPF today is led by Police Commissioner Hung Wee Teck, rose from the ground, highly respected by the rank and file, because he is both operationally very good and at the same time understands his men and women, so they respect him. Below him, the Deputy Commissioners, Jerry C., Florence Stewart, Tan Hang Hui, all in their early to mid-50s. There in the next echelons, you will get an example of SPF's approach to grooming leaders, and I'll illustrate by referring to three officers who are a little bit younger. Hao Kwang Hee, aged 42, Oxford, Stanford, started as investigation officer in Ops, moved on various positions, then Commander G Division, spent some time in policy work in MHA, then Director Ops, and now Director CID, which is one of the most senior positions in SPF at the age of 42. Well, Lian Gim Hua, 41, started again as investigation officer. Before that, on scholarship to Cornell and then Stanford, moved up eventually to become Commander F, which is a stressful position because it doesn't have, in terms of crime, it's not the highest, but it covers PM's ward, and coincidentally my ward as well. So it's a high-stress job. So it's now Director Ops and high-performing officer. Or Elvin Moore, aged 40, again started as an investigation officer, CO of NPC, of which DPM said something, Commander G Division, spent time at MHA, now Director of Police Intel Department. So all three, and others, and the Deputy Commissioners, and the Commissioner, and people below them, exemplify the SPF leadership today. And as I said, we also voluntarily gave up various other officers to the wider public sector. If we go down the ranks, I'll mention 3 officers with whom I worked directly. Again, more to illustrate how SPF grooms its leadership. One of them is 37, 2 others are 33, each spent about 18 months working with me closely. Teo Zeming, 37, Sergius, 33, Li Huanting, 33. They went through various ground postings, IOs, CO NPCs, and so on. Came up to MHA, worked with me. Zeming is now Assistant Commissioner, Commander F Division at 37. Sergius is now a Deputy Assistant Commissioner, Deputy Commander J Division. Huanting is now a DAC, Deputy Commander A Division. I have mentioned the senior leadership because leadership is vital. Leadership also needs, however, committed ground officers. During this motion, we recognize all of them. The officer on coast patrol of our waters, the officer in the NPC on ground patrol, officers doing their ER patrol, transport command, traffic police, POCC command, investigation officers, Gurkha contingent, traffic police, I mentioned, many others, our volunteer constabulary. They are our heroes, unsung, doing their work day in, day out. They are all together integral to the Singapore that we have today. And SPF knows that it must take care of every officer appropriately. The SPF today is an institution that is confident and forward-looking. Officers have a strong sense of purpose, integrity, professionalism. Morale is high, and there is high public trust and confidence in the SPF. This is a remarkable state of affairs, even more remarkable when you look at the situation of police forces in other cities. In the US, police officers nationwide have faced years of protests. There have been calls to defund the police. Gun violence against police officers have also increased. According to data collected by one of the non-profits, number of officers killed or injured by firearms in the USA, 346 last year in 2020, about 1 every day. Against this backdrop, morale of officers is affected. Retirements are up by 45%. Resignations are up 18% from a year ago. Many police departments have trouble finding new recruits. But the difference between Singapore and these places are not the officers. Our officers are neither superior nor worse. I mean, we make it a point to choose very good officers, but people for people, Singaporeans, I say quality-wise, it's difficult to draw conclusions. And the US police force in some states, we learn much from them. They are very good. But it's a difference is the wider criminal justice system and the laws that can have impact on the police force and the entire approach of society to the police. For example, if you have lax gun control laws, you will get more homicides and more police officers killed. And if you're a police officer in the US, as one officer described quite graphically, every time you get a call, whether it's a cat on a tree that is stuck, I don't know why cat should be stuck on a tree, but anyway, cat on a tree that is stuck, or a baby that is being abandoned, or a neighborhood call, any call, you go there thinking that someone might shoot you. You go prepared for all eventualities. You can see why. If you move to another example, London, I will illustrate my point by reference to a report by an independent panel called the Report of Daniel Morgan Independent Panel, which was released in June this year and received substantial coverage, including in the Financial Times. It relates to a person by the name of Daniel Morgan, who was a private investigator. He was murdered in southeast London in 1987. 5 criminal investigations and 5 unsuccessful prosecutions. In 2013, finally, an independent panel was set up to consider what happened. And the independent panel found that the family of Daniel Morgan was failed by police corruption. This is about the London Metropolitan Police. For example, the police officer who had searched Morgan's office was a business associate and later colleague of the chief suspect. In 2011, the London Met acknowledged, and I quote, "Police corruption in original investigation was a significant factor in this failure." London now has more than 100 murders reported every year since 2015, and a June 2021 survey shows that only 36% of the population in London have confidence in the police, vis-à-vis 48% nationwide in the UK. Morale is also low. In a survey of police officers in England and Wales, 85% reported that police service morale was low. 90% cited the public treatment of the police had the highest negative impact on morale amongst other factors, including pay and workload. So why this state of affairs? It's not because the London police officers are man for man worse. It's all these other factors. So I would say to members, have a care when we look at paths which we have avoided and which we now may feel tempted to go back to. The London Met is a highly professional outfit, and we learn much from them as well. But it's the criminal justice system, the pay of police officers, many other factors. It's a political will to make sure that the criminal justice system works, that the police officers are protected as long as they haven't done wrong, and that the system allows for proper investigation and prosecution while making sure that innocent people can go free. And therefore, the entire system works properly with the right balance. And look, every police force, including ours, will have errant officers. And we have to be most strict, the strictest with our own officers. That is the way to make sure that morale is up, integrity is up, public trust and confidence is up. So our officers know any officer caught wanting will be treated more severely than any member of the public. That's been our approach. When an allegation is made against any officer, the Internal Affairs Office conducts the investigation. If wrongdoing is uncovered, the SPF, or in appropriate cases, the Public Service Commission, will take disciplinary action against the officer. Where crimes are perceived to have been committed, there will be charging in court, and the courts often take into account the fact that this is a police officer who is charged with upholding the laws, and therefore the punishment is usually stricter. If a further review is necessary, there is an independent review panel comprising persons of standing who can review the findings of the SPF's own internal investigations. As a result, we have been able to maintain public trust, keep up morale, and a strong sense of mission within our police force. Consistently over the years, a large majority of our officers say that the work they do is meaningful, and these are anonymized surveys. The work they do is meaningful, they feel engaged with the SPF, they identify with the SPF's mission, vision, and core values. Internally, employee engagement survey results show very high morale over the last few years. Average scores for engagement across the SPF has increased from 76% in 2018 to 78% last year. Half-yearly surveys conducted over the last 3 years consistently showed that more than 4 out of 5 SPF officers found their work to be meaningful. But workload remains an issue. Members will know SPF's manpower strength is very lean compared to police forces in other major cities such as London, New York, Hong Kong. And there is a limit to how much our officers can do with the resources that they have. And we are studying this closely, and we will come back on this. The third factor that I want to touch on is explaining SPF success is the strong trust between the community and the police. Mr. Patrick Tay, Mr. Dennis Tan spoke about this. Sir Robert Peel, known as the father of modern policing, said, "The police are the public and the public are the police." We recognized early on the importance of building trust between the community and the police. Over the years, many different community initiatives, the NPP system, the NPC and COP system, the community watch groups, Citizens on Patrol, to name a few, have contributed to the high level of trust between the community and the police. The public trust in the police sets the tone for everyday interactions between the police and the community. When a police officer arrives on a scene, people cooperate with his directions. They accept the officer has a right to investigate and manage the incident in the interest of the public. And members of the public largely trust the SPF. Many help the SPF by sharing crime prevention messages, providing information on crimes, and yet others have risked their own safety assisting police during arrests and live incidents. And we make it a point to recognize, honor, praise them, and give them an award. This level of public trust cannot be taken for granted. The SPF has to continue to maintain a high level of trust with the community. Now, let me move on to paying tribute to our officers. As we reflect on the SPF's progress, we want to pay tribute to SPF officers past and present for their contributions and for their sacrifices. I thank Mr. Murali for inviting to the House today some of our retired SPF officers and SPF officer representatives and leadership group led by our Commissioner of Police, Ungwi Tek. They're all up in the gallery. Our SPF officers across the generations, regular officers, civilian staff, national servicemen, volunteer special constabulary officers, retired officers, they have served Singapore faithfully and with utmost commitment. Mr. Murali spoke about the 125 SPF officers who have given their lives, probably more, definitely more, but 125 that we see in their line of duty. And he has listed their names in the annex to his speech to be recorded in the handset. I will mention 6. Detective Corporal Yuen Yen Pang and VSC Officer Andrew Teo Bok Lan, who were attacked and killed by rioting mobs during the 1955 Hockley bus riots. Inspector Alan Lim Kim Sai, who died in a shootout with a notorious kidnapper in 1965. Mr. Murali spoke about him, and his son is here. Sergeant Mohammed Saad bin Omar, who died after being shot by a drug suspect in 1979. Station Inspector Bu Tiang Huat, who died while on anti-housebreaking rounds in 1994. And Staff Sergeant Natsri, who was involved in a traffic accident while on patrol duties in 2017, 4 years ago, and I went to his wake. These officers and others gave up their lives while trying to keep us safe and secure. We remember what they have done for the SPF and for Singapore. We are privileged to have the families of 2 of our fallen officers with us in the House today. Mr. David Lim, as you heard, is a retired police superintendent, son of the late Inspector Alan Lim, and his grandfather was also a police officer. We also have Madam Chu Tuanjong and Mr. Bu Jia Liang, widow and son of the late Station Inspector Bu Tiang Huat. They are standing up in the gallery. Can I invite them to stand up? And we... Thank you. Thank you. As we commemorate the SPF's bicentennial, we want to recognize the important contributions of the SPF and accord recognition to its officers. Members asked for it, so I will set out how we will recognize them. A commemorative Singapore Police Bicentennial 2020 medal will be awarded to SPF officers who are in service for any period between 1st January 2020 and 31 December 2020. This includes regular police officers, volunteer police officers, full-time national servicemen, and operationally ready national servicemen. The medal will be worn on their uniform. We will also award a medallion to former police officers who had retired or completed their national service liabilities before the 1st of January 2020 to recognize their contributions. This medallion will also be given to civilian officers who are in service with the SPF in 2020. The families of SPF officers who had given their lives in the line of duty will also receive the medallion in honor of their contributions and sacrifice. The Singapore Police Bicentennial 2020 Medallion is a reminder of SPF's proud history and of the country's appreciation of their steadfast commitment in safeguarding our everyday lives. From the past to the present and now to the future, I said the third part of my speech is that as SPF commemorates its bicentennial, we are looking ahead. How can the SPF strengthen itself for the future? Better equipment, training, and more technology. Let me explain to members by giving you the perspective of a police officer responding to a hypothetical incident 4 years from now in 2025. And I'll show this, or I'll explain this by reference to some slides. First, before the police officer reports for duty, information on his work assignments for the day will be available through his police smartphone. He will be notified of his patrol sector and partner. Next slide. Once in the station, he collects his equipment from the automated systems. The systems use RFID technology, seamless. At the touch of a button, he will instantly draw his communication sets, his firearms and taser, his other patrol equipment such as his riot shield, ballistic resistant vest. His body-worn camera comes equipped with live streaming capabilities for enhancing sense-making during incidents. And his Glock 19 Gen 5 pistol provides higher firepower and ammunition capacity. The officer and his partner then get into their next-gen fast response car, FRC, equipped with RFID technology as well, enables them to keep track of the equipment within the FRC. They perform a visual check, drive off in the FRC for duty, so no more stock taking, checking everything. Each FRC is equipped with improved safety features, cameras with live streaming capabilities feeding back to Police Operations Command Center. Assume a homicide is reported. Victim's body is found burnt and disposed in a car parked in a secluded location, no witnesses. POCC will push the case information to the officers in real time. And as officers rush to the scene, SPF investigators will make inquiries. POCC, the extensive network of police cameras, will allow investigators to quickly narrow down a prime suspect based on movements caught on camera, and also help trace his current movements and whereabouts. This sounds hypothetical, but I've based it on a real incident where a body was burnt in a remote location, and police did find the culprit based on cameras and other information. Investigators access a digitized and automated screening platform. System combs through multiple police databases, provides case information on the culprit, taking maybe 75% less time to do so than before. Very powerful, brings all the databases together, information at fingertips. Crime scene specialists process the murder scene with advanced technology, and through forensics, victim is identified, DNA evidence places the culprit at the scene of the murder. The officers then locate the suspect and arrest him. This is an SPF that will use technology quite extensively to enhance its operational capabilities and streamline its processes. In particular, we will continue to enhance our sensor networks. We have installed more than 90,000 police cameras since 2012, as I've told this House a number of times. Surveillance cameras deployed by government, whether in Singapore or other countries, are sometimes criticized as being an invasion of privacy. These claims overlook a couple of basic points: that most people want to live in an environment which is safe and secure. And conceptually, having cameras in public spaces is no different from police interviewing eyewitnesses to establish what happened. The camera is a constant, ever-present eyewitness whose memory won't be suspect. It's literally black and white evidence. Surveys also show that people feel safer with the prominent placement of police cameras in their own neighborhoods. They want them. People want these cameras in their neighborhoods. And they've been very effective in helping police deter, detect, solve crimes. For example, in April this year, there was an armed robbery. It was solved within 5 hours. The suspect was an ATOS auxiliary police officer. He had drawn his firearm. He changed his uniform, left the headquarters without authorization, visited a moneylender in Jurong, told staff to hand over the cash as he had the firearm, made away with more than $24,000. With the help of cameras and other tech and investigative techniques, he was identified, traced, tracked, and arrested in a safe manner within 5 hours. The potential he could have caused was great. So we will install more cameras across the island. As I've told members, we aim to have 200,000 cameras at least by 2030. They help our police officers to deter and detect and solve, as I said earlier. SPF will also continue to prioritize community policing, step up partnerships with individuals, grassroots organizations, businesses, other public agencies in keeping Singapore safe. Some key initiatives include the Safety and Security Watch Group and the upcoming Community Watch Scheme, which will go beyond geographical-based approaches to interest-based engagements with the community. Madam Deputy Speaker and members, the SPF's story has been an inspiring one. Let me conclude with a quote again from Mr. Lee, again in 1972, when addressing police officers at the dining inn. Various quotes from MM will give a sense to members that he was a key architect, if not the key architect, of modern SPF, and a lot of philosophy, the approach to the legal system, SPF work came from him. So let me quote. You need integrity, you need a sense of purpose, you have got to have that mark which others recognize to be special. You are upholding the state. Without you, without the quiet civil servant who gets things done, all the young executives who can wine and dine in Shangri-La, they will be down the drain. As the SPF writes its next chapter, I am confident that the SPF will continue to uphold its tradition of excellence and stay anchored on its core values, courage, loyalty, integrity, fairness, even as it charts its way through a more complex operating environment. And in doing so, the SPF must continue to hold its officers to the highest standards of integrity and professionalism in order to maintain the trust of Singaporeans whom it serves. I ask all members to join me in congratulating and thanking the SPF for its 200 years of exemplary service in keeping Singapore safe and secure. And long may this continue for many generations to come. Thank you.
Mr. Christopher D'Souza.
I would like to thank the members, including the Minister for Home Affairs, as well as the Deputy Prime Minister, for speaking on this motion and for your support. I fully support the introduction of the Singapore Police Bicentennial 2020 Medal and Medallion for police officers and other officers serving with the SPF to honour the SPF's contributions on the occasion of its bicentennial. It is a meaningful way to honour the SPF's contributions and strengthen the sense of pride and identity amongst police officers on this significant occasion. It expresses the collective appreciation of the House for all that our police officers have done. Before I move on with my planned speech, I would like to just make reference to Ms. Sylvia Lim's comments that the CNB and the ICA were not mentioned. The reason for that really is when Mr. Murali and I proposed this motion, it was to commemorate SPF's 200th anniversary. It's bicentennial. And I did a check. CNB was formed in 1971, and the ICA was consolidated into the ICA in 2003. So nothing in this motion dilutes our appreciation to CNB and the ICA. In fact, in 2017, the House debated a motion which I moved on strengthening Singapore's fight against drugs. And I quote from a speech that I gave, that the CNB and the Singapore Prison Services are sterling institutions staffed with dedicated and committed officers. Their effort in the fight against drugs is courageous, but the fight is not only theirs to bear. All Singaporeans have a role to play. So nothing in this debate should be misinterpreted as being diluted appreciation to CNB and ICA. In fact, we hold them also in high esteem. Looking to the future, over the last 200 years, the SPF has displayed an unwavering commitment to keep Singapore and Singaporeans safe and secure. Our SPF officers have served with integrity, professionalism, and courage. We are proud of the SPF's reputation as a world-class police force, trusted by Singaporeans. As we look to the next 200 years, I'm glad to hear from the Minister of Home Affairs that the SPF is already enhancing its capabilities to meet the emerging challenges. However, even as the SPF continues its transformation and capabilities, it is crucial that SPF and its officers continue to be anchored by their core values of courage, loyalty, integrity, and fairness. If this is achieved, I am sure that SPF will continue to grow from strength to strength, and Singaporeans will get to enjoy many more years of safety and security. Therefore, in conclusion, Madam, I invite this House to resolve to commemorate and honour the important contributions of the Singapore Police Force and its officers to nation building and to keeping Singapore as one of the safest countries in the world. Thank you.
The question is that this House commemorates and honours the important contributions of the Singapore Police Force and its officers to nation building and to keeping Singapore as one of the safest countries in the world. As many as are of that opinion, say aye. Aye. To the contrary, say no. I think the ayes have it. The ayes have it.
Item 3, a motion standing in the name of Ms. Herting Rue on empowering women.
Order. I propose that we take a break now, and I suspend the sitting, and we'll take the chair at 3:53. Okay, 4 o'clock.